And I think we are live. Hello, everybody.
Hello, you caught us in the middle of discussing selling holographic Taraka cards.
Hello.
Wait, has someone invented holograms when I wasn't looking?
Not that kind of holographic.
Oh, like Pokemon cards.
Like shiny, yes.
Ah, beautiful. Welcome, everyone, to Twice Bitten After Dark, the show where we talk about stuff like the next great trading card game craze. How's everyone doing tonight?
You know, living the dream, as always. I made delicious pasta from HelloFresh tonight. So Anyway, use our code. We don't have a code for HelloFresh.
We should.
I have free meals, so if someone wants them, you can DM me.
Oh man, can you imagine if like Amity were sponsored by HelloFresh and Airthrendir by Skillshare and I don't know what would everybody else's sponsors be?
Metreon is like one of those wine boxes of the month, and is 50% off your antidepressants.
I feel like that's several people in the party, to be fair.
Willison's NordVPN.
Yes,
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see a Metreon makeup box. That'd be fun. But yeah.
Man. Alright, so it's been a while since we did one of these last, hasn't it been? When did we last...
It's been 10 episodes. or
77
9.
sessions ago, I think.
Beginning
Oh,
of January.
I was actually
Small
playing
eternity.
Yeah.
Alright, well, there have been some things that happened, I think, you know. There were some meetings with
one or
this guy
two.
named Strahd. There were
Just
some,
one
know,
thing
levels
happened.
gained. Just one thing, exactly. Airthrendir became a dad. Let's see,
That
what
is
else
true.
happened?
That is absolutely true.
Implying he wasn't one already.
Very fair.
You don't know everything from his backstory. You don't know what's
Is he
changed with him.
is he still a dad if he puts his kid in foster care?
That is a very nuanced question, and I do not feel qualified.
I mean, as the daughter of an adopted woman, I would say yeah. I'd say that it still counts in like a 6 degrees of separation way. I feel like he's still a father.
Alright.
You know.
On that semi-wholesome note, let's see. We got some good questions here tonight. We've got, a few things that happen in addition to Curse of Strahd. We've got a new Ravenloft guide coming out. Where do you guys think we want to start? We want to start Twice Bitten, or do you want to talk a little bit about Ravenloft?
I want to talk about Ravenloft.
I feel like
we're
I'm
getting
always
new
talking
content.
about Ravenloft.
It's
Oh,
been
boy.
5 years.
Yeah, so we've got here a question from Tenor Chef on Reddit and Discord. With the recent announcement of Van Richten's guide, what are some Ravenloft features you all are hoping to see in the sourcebook? What kind of 5e content would you like to see more official support for in general? This is just a nice starter question. If you would like to put in more questions in the Twitch chat, feel free to drop those in, and we will be collecting those and getting to them as we can. But in the meantime, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. How are we feeling? What are we hoping for? And what 5e stuff would we like to see more of?
I will say that Alex, I don't know if Alex is watching tonight, but they understand that the thing that I am most excited for is my boy Aslan. I want him in everything to happen forever. What I would really want, of course, is to take some of the 5e Ravenloft things that have gotten twisted in certain authors' adaptations and go back to a more nuanced and layered portrayal of certain characters and NPCs, namely titular ones. But I think overall, just to lean into the horror genre in general. There are so many different facets to Ravenloft. It's not just campy 1980s monster movie horror. It's political horror. It's social horror. It's all sorts of multi-layered and multifaceted things that I think people, if I exist and I really want those sort of multifaceted stories, I cannot be the only one who really want to tell complicated and difficult stories and do it in a way that can end up being really cathartic, like through a game of D&D. So I'm hoping that 5e creators take the hint from that this is what people want, and that there's a whole there's a whole universe, literally, of Ravenloft content to adapt and dive into.
I know one thing I'm kind of looking forward to is it seems that they've, very well researched and very well staffed up from a lot of diverse places. Obviously, Barovia and Curse of Strahd are this very, classic Dracula tale, this very, Western vampire gothic horror story with that very specific model. I'm kind of intrigued to see, kind of a global take on horror. I know we've heard some, Indian aspects, Southeast Asian stuff. I think there's a few other things, so I'm very curious to see, what kind of areas they explore.
Yeah, because I think, older Ravenloft lore, first and second edition, not so much, but in the third edition, they really, really expanded out the domains, and, there was stuff based off of Egypt and African tribes. There was, French and Russian. There was all sorts of different groups of people that were, that were either explored in sort of like metaphor, it wasn't necessarily supposed to be like, this is the country that we are, trying to be, or the culture that we're trying to influence. And this group of writers specifically is incredibly diverse, both culturally and also, religiously. There's a lot of LGBTQ writers this time around, which I think is going to help sort of make, again, this thing that 5e hasn't really touched on is accessible to as many different groups of people as possible. And so I think they finally, Wizards of the Coast finally taken the hint that we want the writers to tell their stories and to tell different stories in a respectful and exciting way. And what better way to do that than to get people who have actually lived this experience to tell those stories. So I'm really happy that they've taken that initiative in this way.
And hey, what better medium for that than things that will scare the pants off your players? Am I right?
100%.
Any other thoughts? How are we feeling about Ravenloft?
I would like the official release of the College of Spirits Bard to completely invalidate the way I'm playing Amity.
Oh boy, yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah. I'd say for my part, I want the monsters. I'd say the best 5e monsters, and to be clear, I think a lot of them are not greatly designed, but I think the best ones are the ones that are designed for a specific purpose and a narrative. And if they're making 40-odd monsters that are, presuming some of these are Dark Lords, but the rest are, specifically meant for horror, then I am so jazzed about that. Because, a creature like a Mimic or a Roper or a Strahd zombie is there to, elicit a response and a reaction and a way of fighting it, as opposed to just kind of hit it till it dies. So if we can have, stuff that mechanically adds to the horror that isn't a bookkeeping nightmare like the Strahd zombies, I will be very happy.
Like a vampire Illithid, perhaps?
Maybe.
How does that even work? Do they just have, fangs on the ends of their tentacles?
You should ask Lissa von Zarevich that. She'd be able to explain it quite well.
Well, I'm certainly intrigued. All right. Here's an interesting question that comes up. Since we're on the topic of, villains and such, Curse of Strahd specifically. Obviously, there are a lot of villains in horror and certainly in Curse of Strahd. I think this has come up, at least once, either discussing Strahd or, the smaller characters like Victor Velakovich or Vargas Velakovich. Even certain characters like, Van Richten are villainous in certain aspects, despite how 5e treats them, obviously in a more nuanced way. So how do you kind of approach this kind of divergence between playing more villainous characters like the Baron, like Victor, like Strahd, like reasonable people, and playing them like unreasonable people, because on one side you want to make sure that they make sense, on the other hand you want to make sure that they're not so agreeable or reasonable that you're either trying to persuade your players to go with them, or even making that character sympathetic in a way that they shouldn't be.
I think for me it comes down to what the characters want, because the way I always think about it is most people are logical. Most folks kind of have good reasons for doing what they do, in the sense of they're motivated naturally. But sometimes the things they want are stupid. Compare, someone like Fiona, who effectively wants power and takes a pretty logical way of getting it, making a pretty calculating villain, to the Baron, who wants this kind of nebulous concept of happiness, of respect. He doesn't I don't think if you asked the Baron what he specifically wanted, he could tell you. He's looking for this thing that can't really exist, a town that is perfectly happy. And I think that kind of informs that. If what the villain wants is reasonable or achievable or even makes a lot of sense, hell, it even works with Strahd. A lot of what he wants are not things he can actually achieve, so it kind of twists how you have to play him.
That's an interesting take. I think I agree, insofar as the reasoning making a difference. I think also, it's also a matter of, desires and wants, like you said, kind of their goals. Where, everyone's in a certain way, most of the time, a hero of their own story. And, unless it be fit... I mean, this is kind of the difference between, chaotic stupid and chaotic neutral. Which is, just because you're chaotic and aren't particularly altruistic doesn't mean you're going to be actively rude to everyone. Even chaotic evil characters don't, go around stabbing powerful city guards all the time. Someone can be perfectly reasonable and seem sympathetic in certain respects, even if they have an absolutely abhorrent moral compass. And I think that's something we kind of, try to ignore in real life. Where we look at, people who've done atrocious things and we think, oh, they're a villain. But I think that kind of, cheats the point of horror, which is ordinary people can do villainous things. I mean, there's a pretty good quote from, I think it's Caduceus in Critical Role, and, he's not exactly a philosopher, but, there are no good people or bad people, there are just people and things that people do. And I think that's, it's easy to write off someone as being a good person or a bad person, when I think it, maybe is more healthy in terms of, how you judge people's actions and how you try to encourage people to act better, to view them as people who are doing good or bad things.
There's also a dimension where sometimes you don't even really have to evaluate whether the things that people are doing are objectively good or objectively bad. All you really need to do to make sure that somebody stays a villain is make sure that the objectives they want are something that the PCs are not going to allow. And you can make them as sympathetic as you like. Maybe they have the best reasoning, the best possible reasoning for, say, wanting to keep the Sun Sword buried for 1,000 years. But the PCs are going to well, a lot of the time, the party is going to try to continue along with their own agenda anyway, and you can build a lot of nice tension with that, pitting, perhaps two different factions who are both good, but have different views on something, have different opinions on something, are trying to use the same resources different ways, and they can come into conflict anyway.
All right. Well, thank you, Kaya. Linus, you had something else?
Oh, yeah. So for sort of lesser villains like the Baron Vallaki, or even morally great characters like the Abbot at the St. Markovia place, I like to start them off with some facts that they will consider to be absolutely 100% true, cannot be convinced otherwise. I am the smartest and best possible ruler of Vallaki, or creating Basilica is the only way to bring peace to this land. And then sort of play them as reasonable people conditioned on these mildly incorrect facts being true.
Fair point. I dig it. All right, so speaking of more sympathetic characters, and the stories behind them, we've got our own lovely cast of beautiful PCs, all perfect 10s, which we'll get to later. But we got a fun question from Reddit user TheGreat1228. Speaking of stories behind characters, here's the question. Almost always, every character's voice has a story behind it. So what inspired each of you to choose the particular accent or voice that you use? I feel like I can't answer this question just because there are too many. But...
That's a great question. Who wants to go first?
I mean, I feel like the question for you, Dragna, is why haven't you used Swahadin's voice yet?
I'm
Why
saving
haven't you?
I presume that's for actual Ra then when he comes
Yeah,
up.
you haven't met him yet.
Well, I will go first. I cannot do accents. And so a lot of my characters' voices are, my voice pitched up or pitched down with different strengths of, forcefulness behind them, different types of prosody and rhythm. And for Lillison, I wanted to give her an accent or a voice that had just a hint of aristocracy. And so I settled on something that basically she emphasizes her consonants a lot more than I would. And I edge a little bit into the transatlantic voice, which is an accent that was, created for old-timey radio and movies, things like that, to, capture an echo of the sort of class status that I was trying to hint at without being too overt. And I find that it really helps to evoke characters that are more intellectual if you don't give them a lot of like growl and bass in their voice. And so, altogether, it comes together the way it does, and with an edge of exasperation sometimes. I think it gets across her character quite effectively.
I'll take this one. So, for Earthendeer, it's partially two things. One, I'm a southerner, and so me slipping into a drawl is really, really easy. Imagine I'm talking to my grandparents and suddenly I'm there. But number two is that I set out pretty deliberately to play Earthendeer against type, which is to say, like, there's this kind of vibe for elves as aristocratic British accents, etc., and I really wanted to try something different for him. So what I was trying to evoke was this southern aristocracy, not the kind you might think of, but just that, the same sort of pride, the same sort of, I suppose refinement, but coming from a place of, I'm rambling, but coming from a much different place. And also, from there, you add, very high energy, a little bit of pizzazz, and let him slip in and out of it as appropriate. And, well, he's been a lot of fun.
So Kiva's accent, there's a two-parted answer. There's a lie, which is that I am trying to connect to my own Irish heritage and really, use the voice of my family and my people. And then there's the truth, which is that Kiva's accent was supposed to be Southern, and I had intended for her to have a Southern accent pretty much up until the day I recorded the intro. But by that point, I had been watching too many episodes of The Great British Bake Off with my mom, and I could not do a Southern accent. It just was not happening. And every time I spoke, it turned into this Irish accent that I have now adapted as Kiva's. So I guess, yeah, that's the truth. It's not as exciting or poetic or intelligent as the other people's accent choices. The truth is I could not speak in anything other than a British or Irish accent after watching 30 episodes of The Great British Bake Off in a row. So there you go.
Honestly, at this point, I can't even imagine Kiva without the accent. So
Yeah,
That's
pretty
good.
inseparable.
That's great.
From now on.
Oh, Jack, I see you volunteered. Where'd Metreons come from?
So, and I guess I'll get into it a little bit later with some of the other questions. But when I came up with the idea for Punch Metreon, I had always wanted to have his Metreon voice and his Punch voice be very, very different, but also kind of come from the same place. And when you think of rakish rogue type characters, you kind of think of, maybe a kind of a rougher working class type. So that's kind of where the Cockney thing came from. And then I wanted to separate that from the Metreon accent, which is a bit more, I guess, general, refined British accent. So I just wanted to play with kind of the dual identities, and I figured that the way to do that was with the accents.
The first time that Cockney accent came out was fantastic.
Oh, so good. So good.
All right, I think there's just one left. Linus, how did Amity come about?
Oh, geez. Okay, so obviously the only accent I can do is standard fantasy British. And I was like, what's a good cartoon character that represents the sort of energy that I want Amity to have? Because obviously Amity has a lot of energy and likes, doing cool things. And, well, clearly that's Luke from Professor Layton, right? And then I just sort of did a random British accent. I don't know. I don't have a good story behind this. Whoever asked this question is clearly way better at picking an accent.
No, you're good. You're good. All right, so more, in-game, I suppose, than out-of-game considerations. We've had some pretty notable PC lore reveals recently. We've had, Lillison sharing a little bit about her resurrection. We've had Madame Ava outing her surname. We've had hints about the identity of Metreon's patron. We've had Metreon revealing the fact that he has a patron, or I guess I should say a sugar daddy. We've had Kiva's dip into Paladin. We've had Lillison's Draconic Scales. That's a lot of stuff. How do your characters feel about all this? Either about their own stuff going on or about what they've learned about others.
Lillison is furious that she's been outed, by the way.
Oh, it's so
So-
good.
Ooh.
Yeah,
I'm glad that Lillison stuff is being forcibly outed, because I feel like Lillison is being so mysterious and refusing to tell us about any of it that I have a player have sort of given up on extracting anything from her.
I'm really happy with, just as a tangent, I'm really happy with the Madame Ava reveal, because I think that it sort of puts Lillison in her place a bit, and realizing that she doesn't have the kind of control that she thinks she does, and it's like, no, I actually know everything right now, and you're gonna sit down and pay attention. And I think that kind of put her on an even balance with us, so to speak.
I feel touched, and Lillison feels insulted, so there we go.
The fun part about the names is that it's all right in the text. She just calls everyone out.
But as far as all the reveals, specifically for Metreon, the backstory reveal in Kresk was difficult, painful, if you will, and I don't think he ever intended for it to happen. But I think it's that sort of thing where, and it's sort of the attitude that I've adopted playing this game is even though it's only been a couple weeks, it's that idea of you're in the fight for your life and you don't know how much time you have left. And for him, he could die very well tomorrow, if not tonight. So if he's going to make it out and kind of liberate himself, he felt like he needed to at least let the others know at least why he was feeling the way he was feeling. But as far as the Bone Daddy stuff, that is throwing him for a complete loop, and he's gonna have some questions for Ava come next episode.
I can't guarantee that she'll answer them, but it'll be fun.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I don't expect any real answers, but she seems to know some things.
What about the rest of y'all? Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. No, Twy.
No. Aerthrandir hasn't had no recent revelations. You go for this one.
Okay. I will say, in another life, I think I would have liked to see what happened had Kiva not taken the Paladin path, simply because she's starting to be good, damn it. And I think I it was a surprise to me that I was not anticipating for her to become a paladin at all. I wasn't anticipating her having the connections that she had and has right now, and the idea that she would ever really want to be sort of the front line as part of like being a team, as opposed to just being the front line because she doesn't trust anyone else to handle things. And so it's really interesting to see how Barovia has actually brought something good out of her and something positive. She was not really a magic user before this as well, so she's sort of unlocked part of her sort of latent Fae abilities, but has also found purpose and promise moving forward. So I think that was I'm happy to see that it's being received so well, and I'm excited to see where it continues and to just get more spell slots so that I can just Divine Smite everything.
Love it. And Linus, we got some Amity backstory too, right?
Wait, that was after the previous After Dark? Wow, okay.
Yeah, the last one was the feast.
True. Yeah, you've got some Amity backstory indeed. You know some of the things I was thinking about when creating Amity as a character. But the rest of the party, only Erthrendir has heard any of this, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is kind of layered to where, like, there's very specific revelation, like, segments.
Yeah,
True.
I think that maybe Metron's the only one who actually has been like open with everybody at this point, which is weird because
hilariously enough, yeah,
I never intended for that to be, but yeah, well,
Eva also had, but she revealed her backstory in like the
under duress, yeah,
duress, yes.
So I feel like it was equally open with all of us.
Did the equivalent of like walking into class, then telling everyone like exactly what your favorite foods are, where you're going for vacation that summer, and everyone's just like, yeah, I just said my favorite color when I was introducing myself.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
hard. But we love
I'm
it.
gonna have to come up. I need to come up with new Amity secrets to sort of fill the gaps left by revealing these ones.
Yeah, and it was pointed out that sorry, did you have more?
No.
It was pointed out that Lillison's the Dragon Scale reveal was actually only done to the abbot, and none of the rest of the party knows it, even though the audience and the other players know. And it's interesting because I wasn't intending for that to be a thing, and now, of course, everybody who has been speculating our classes all along, has it confirmed. Yes, she is a draconic bloodline sorcerer, but it's the case that she saw the abbot as an authority figure, where maybe she doesn't quite see the rest of the PCs as authority figures that might be able to give her information and guidance and things like that. So I think the way, this is a slight tangent, but I think the way that we all viewed the abbot was pretty different among all the PCs, right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because Lillison obviously viewed him as like an authority figure and someone she could confide in. Metron seemed to be pretty scared of him, seeing him kind of orchestrating and keeping together the mongrel folk in the Abbey. I'm still curious as to what the others felt like, though, because I feel like I have an inclination, but I'm curious to hear it.
Well, I guess Amity viewed him as a good person that got himself to a bad situation, but now that he did the dress promise, Amity views him as like freaking savior sugar daddy over here.
I mean, yeah, I'm getting full like vending machine vibes. Like, anything is forgiven as long as you accept my crumpled dollars.
Erthrendir's like half intrigued, half horrified, because like that whole mad scientist vibe, especially with magic, like majorly skeeves him out. But he's also genuinely fascinated by his like entire thing, especially now that he knows he's an angel. So it's mixed feelings.
I think Kiva sees dealing with the abbot as the lesser of two evils right now, because she doesn't get the sense that Strahd is going to be willing for any kind of willing to entertain any kind of bargain. The abbot seems just as powerful, if not just as dangerous, as Strahd. And I think she's like, okay, so at least this guy's offering something in exchange, as opposed to where Strahd is just like, this is only going to end one way. And so I think she is of the mind that, like, okay, I will deal with this guy, and I will probably not like it, but I'm going to shut the fuck up because he could kill me in a heartbeat if I try to argue with him on anything. So.
What a reaction for a PC. I've never seen someone, act to preserve their own life before. That's kind of incredible.
Crazy.
Who would have thought it?
Well, we have another question here from Reddit user Sleemer. This one's a fun one. I know I've been thinking about it myself. Has your opinion of the rules as written module changed at all from playing Twice Bitten? What has surprised you about the experience?
I mean, aside from, the near impossible escape from Death House, I don't know if anything has dramatically changed as much as playing this and seeing how you've used the text and kind of made it make sense and made it feel cohesive. I think having that is a great educational tool for not only us, but for everybody else who's watching. But I don't think my feelings have changed. I just think that, like, seeing you actually do it, it makes it feel more cohesive in a way that that I wasn't expecting.
I'd say for me, the big thing that, similar to Jack, the big thing that struck me was that how you've had to sew things together because you can't sand off the weird corners that Curse of Strahd DMs normally sand off. You can't try and, add your own things to the history or make more discernible motivations. Like, everyone's got to be how they are. So I guess what stuck with me is that some of the conclusions that we've kind of gotten to from this strict playthrough are fascinating, and I really want to fold those elements in. Like, how you handled Fiona's revolution was perfect. So just kind of, that's my big takeaway.
Cool. Well, thank you, Twy. And I think, I've definitely learned a lot, just like, perceptions that I had either from the community or from myself. Like, one thing I didn't realize, before reading the module is just how active the Keepers of the Feather are, for example. Like, from the Were Raven that Erwin sets to tail the PCs to the winery to, like, the Guardians who, like, actually show up and help if the inn is attacked. There's, like, literally, like, an encounter I think you get, like, as a random encounter, where if you get the Were Raven encounter twice, like, he literally just reveals himself to you and says, hey, go to the Blue Water Inn, you'll find friends there. Which is, like, kind of overt. So, like, wow. I mean, beyond that, like, I think just playing this in full and, like, kind of no holds barred, with Strahd specifically, like, I'm pretty confident at this point that his charm is 100% his strongest ability, which is not something I really suspected before. I mean, I kind of, had an inkling of it, which is why I, didn't really abuse it, but, yeah. Other than that, there was, like, a few other things. I know that I was planning on, posting something on Reddit at some point, but, I think, one other thing that a lot of people probably, on the subreddit, at least in the community, is just, like, how, like, lawless Vallaki actually is. Like, there's no police presence, like, aside from Izek and, like, the guards, and he can only get, like, 6 guards at a time, maybe 12. Like, Vlakovich can't really do much. Like, at the second the PCs show any kind of backbone and proficiency, like, they have the run of the town. So, all in all, like, a lot of, like, misperceptions that kind of reading the text and, cross-referencing things, because I found, like, cross-referencing is just really essential. Like, holy cow, I did not, like, I'm putting together, like, a history of Barovia spreadsheet right now, and, the sheer number of things that involve, like, 2, 3, 4 different citations to cross-reference and figure out, what affects what and where that places it in the timeline, and how the placement of the timeline makes suggestions elsewhere, like, it is exhausting. And, like, on the one hand, I see, why Wizards writes their modules like this, because they want it to be, kind of like a story, because a lot of people buy these modules and they never run them, they just like to read them. But insofar as usability, there is a lot of context that is just shattered to smithereens and spread across the book. So, like whenever someone's like, do I have to read the whole book, to run the module? Like, I think my new answer is going to be, like usually I used to say you have to read it once. I think I'm going to say now read it twice, just so you could understand like not just what everything is, but how it all fits together. Because there are a lot of random details just floating around.
Well, once you publish that timeline history of Barovia, then I don't think people will need that because they'll have your sheet to pull from.
Exactly. And you'll have people messaging you to tell you how you're wrong.
Exactly.
Work smarter, not harder, you know what I'm saying?
Oh god, there's like the whole Esmeralda Van Richten thing that, Twy, you and I were talking about the other day.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, we'll get into that in some Reddit post, I'm sure. Alright,
I think
so...
Oh.
No, Linus, you go.
Yeah, sure. I think that playing the Curse of Strahd as this might be because we're playing non-hero characters, but I think the fact that we're playing these non-sort of adventurers who just explore cool places would not have worked well for me as a first-time player, mostly because we have not experienced as much challenge as I was hoping for, and we've had sort of a dearth of quests that we've been going on that is only now lifting. I still don't know if we'll ever have a reason to visit some of the cooler places like the Swamp or the Werewolf Den. So, like, I guess there's a bunch of things that I've learned, the way Raw does it is actually pretty cool, but I still wouldn't, like, fetishize it to the extent that if I were, like, a new DM watching Twice Bitten for the first time, I would try to make my game replicate what Twice Bitten is doing.
I think that's definitely fair. It's definitely not like... I think one thing that, we've proven is that this is very much not a universalizable experience. Like, you can't really generalize it. It's a very specific, approach, very specific buy-in that you have to do, which can be, really rewarding, I think we found, but it's for one thing, far removed from the standard D&D expectation. And, like, a lot of people play D&D because they want to validate those expectations. So, I think approaching Raw in that specific way, has its benefits if you're willing to buy in, as we've talked about. But I think, if you're looking for a different kind of experience, I think, people should definitely look to make all the changes they need to make sure they get there. Because Raw is, great at certain things, but certainly not great at others. All right, so back to characters and classes. Here's a fun question. At this point, basically, everyone, it seems, is playing their characters pretty far removed from, the general stereotype for their classes. So how would you say your class affects how you play your character, and what parts of the traditional class identity have you left behind? I guess, Metreon for this is probably the easiest answer. He seems to be pretty close to some of the stereotypes.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that, the reason I multi-classed is because I didn't just want to play one cliche, I wanted to play two. But that's, and I joke a little bit, but there's some kind of truth there. What interested me in my approach with him was the idea of taking what in a traditional adventure would be just sort of like the swashbuckling, rakish kind of character, and putting him in the situation where he's not an adventurer, and so he has to react to the environment. And if you're an adventurer and you want to seek that kind of thing out, then maybe you'll put on a braver front. But for someone like him, he's a fish out of water, a very terrified fish out of water. So the things that I've been trying to kind of lay into, are some of the, like the roguish swagger and some of the, warlocky mystery. But the things that I've been trying to like infuse in all of that are the things of, like being more of a coward and more apprehensive to conflict and things like that.
Where does the warlock part come in?
He's still trying to figure that out. I don't have a real answer for that yet, just because both he and I are trying to figure that out as we go.
Excellent. I think that Lillison also doesn't go that far away from her classes, the ones that you guys have been able to figure out so far, that is. And a lot of her feelings towards her magic comes from one sentence in the player's handbook under the sorcerer class section. People with magical power seething in their veins soon discover that the power doesn't like to stay quiet. So you hear about the sort of stereotypical, when they were a teenager, their powers emerged and they accidentally set the house on fire. But not every sorcerer wields fire magic. So what happens when, you wield poison magic and you don't know you have it, and it's just a very slow, insidious thing, and it just slowly comes out and builds up. That's where I started with Lillison. And whatever, rogue levels she has, I think that there is some amount of buy-in to the sort of like secretive, sneaking type thing. Lillison's never going to steal from party members, however. But I am leaning into a very specific subclass of rogue. And I think I'm playing her fairly straight down that path as well.
Yeah, I think I'm loving both of y'all's interpretation of rogues, because my interpretation of the rogue is literally just trying to be Jack Sparrow. I think for Kiva, obviously, and I say this with all the love to Travis Willingham, who is definitely watching right now, I cannot stand the dumb barbarian trope. I think it is so tired and so easy and so incredibly boring. And so I really wanted to look at rage as something, and I think I've said this before, something as a fight or flight response, as opposed to a actual, sort of adrenaline junkie, berserker, Valkyrie sort of deal. So I think the first thing to do that was, okay, if I don't want strength to be her big thing, I think what else could be her strength as a barbarian? And I was immediately drawn to my absolute undying obsession with the strength of ballet dancers. They are some of the most incredibly strong and graceful but durable people in the universe. And that was the sort of strength that I wanted to emulate with Kiva, was that she was quick on her feet and light on her feet, but she could carry herself and has the ability to ground herself incredibly well, and that's where she drew her strength from as a barbarian. So an elf dex barb was something that I felt like had not been done before. If it had, I don't really hear about it. As far as the paladin, I feel like I'm probably going to be playing her pretty traditionally, especially, given her oath. But something that, and I've talked about this with Ragnar before, but something that I feel like some people sort of misunderstand is that paladins don't necessarily make their devotion to a god. Like, Kiva is not a religious person. Her power and her strength as a paladin comes from her oath to, her oath of devotion. It comes from her desire to protect and make sure that people don't ever feel the same way that she is made to feel. And it also comes from her devotion to Irina and what Irina represents, which is, again, a very strong person who has been through a lot, who is searching for something that she doesn't really understand yet, but is fighting every day to get that. And I think Kiva, obviously respects that in such, and empathizes with that in so many ways. But I think, as far as paladin goes, yeah, I'm going to keep playing that pretty straight and narrow. But the barbarian thing, I want to try to subvert every possible way, because no more dumb barbs 2021.
I can't wait to pick a dumb barb.
You can do it, but I love everything you do, so I feel like you could literally do no wrong to me.
Oh. So, for Erthrendir, I think he kind of came from an interesting place in that I wanted to play him pretty straight in the sense of devotion to stories, devotion to, caring about words and the world. But he's coming at things from a historian, not as a performer. And I think that, tiny fact has kind of changed how I play him tremendously. Because, he's a person of a lot of strength and personality. His charisma is not for show. It's there, but he's very much not the type to proselytize or perform It's just that it just shows itself as passion for what he does, for what he cares about, for words and stories, even if he's not necessarily a storyteller in the same way that we think of bards as traditionally. And that's been tough to wrestle with, especially as bardic inspiration is traditionally seen as kind of, well, in older editions, it was literally like something you did and you gave while you played your song and you gave all your friends a bonus. But I've had fun trying to apply it from anything from tactical advice to stuff as genuine as, I believe in you, go fucking get them, because he's a person of such passion and such kind of, I guess, genuinely like love for both for other people and for the subjects he cares about, that it bleeds through into other folks. And that I've really enjoyed getting to play with.
I mean, for Amity, I first chose what kind of person I wanted Amity to be, and then after that I chose one of several races, classes, spells, etc. that I thought fit. And I usually take this approach in order to draw my D&D characters from the full sort of range of personalities, instead of like, okay, I want to play a bard, what kind of person might become that? Yep, that's it.
All right, very cool. So here's a new question. We got it from Twitch, Knock Knock. What's been the most difficult or challenging thing that you've faced or experienced as a player in this campaign? And by contrast, what's been the most rewarding thing?
I think that for me, the most challenging thing and the most rewarding thing is exactly the same, which is we all know this material, or at least we all think we know this material. And there's this very tense balance of how much do we want to lean into that for a better story, for more character growth, for more entertaining material for the viewers, and how much do we actually want to go with what our characters who have no knowledge about this would actually do, which might end up turning into like a fruitless rabbit hole for the next 48 sessions. And I don't know how well we're all doing on that balance. This is something that, I would love to hear more audience feedback about, but it's something that's at the forefront of my mind all the time. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one there.
Not remotely. I'll say for me, the hardest part has been kind of a performance-driven thing, in the sense of, for D&D, I'm very used to making characters that evolve as the story goes on. Like, that's one of my favorite things, is to make somebody who essentially starts out as a blank slate with a few personality traits and becomes based on their friends and their party and what they go through. But the nature of this being both this kind of game and a performance means that I couldn't really do that. And I had to make someone who was a fully featured person on their own, somebody that I would have drafted it, could have gone through 10 levels of campaign. And that is really hard for me. Like, it's easy to come up with backstory, but like it is harder to figure out sort of all the facets of the person if the goal isn't, all right, let's go on an adventure with my friends and see what kind of people that makes us. It's been hard to avoid defaulting to, well, he's a nice guy who goes adventuring and likes people because that lets him do cool things. It's been a time.
Yeah, I also I feel that so much, because any D&D campaign that I've done before this, everyone has been friends, and it was a challenge to force myself to not do that. I will say, though, the double-edged sword for me is that it's really easy to forget the module and the facts of the module, because I swear to God, at like 12:30, Serena is pushed out and Kiva is piloting the ship that is my body. I don't know how healthy that is. I wouldn't recommend it when some sessions get pretty difficult, but it does make things a lot easier as far as making decisions, because she is the one piloting the ship. The only thing that I was sort of nervous about being, and I am nervous about this in our reactions to the Taroka cards, is I do a lot of work in my own just like life. I'm really fascinated by the Taroka readings. And so I know most of them pretty well. So it's going to be a challenge for me to like that Kiva doesn't necessarily understand what all of this means just because you do. And so to really force myself to go back to a time in my mind where I did not know what everything meant in that way.
For me, the hardest part, or a hard part at least, is the way we make sort of sacrifices of D&D fun sometimes in order to provide more fun for the audience. Like, for example, we do a lot of scenes where 1 to 4 of us are just sitting back listening for a while, which wouldn't be good form in a non-broadcast game, but is pretty good for sort of the dramatic sort of Twice Bitten thing where we don't all want to be open with each other all the time. Most rewarding, however, has to be our secret Discord shitposting channel, which I am of course using as synecdoche to represent the cozy friendships I've made with the rest of the cast. Love y'all.
Aww.
Love you too.
Ooh.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Ooh. Yeah. So I'd say the most difficult thing has been being vulnerable. And what I mean by that is I generally have kind of a couple types that I enjoy playing in a D&D setting or a role-playing setting, and they aren't very vulnerable. Metreon, oddly enough, is probably the most emotionally raw, vulnerable character that I've ever played. And, you know, as someone in my own life who maybe isn't the most comfortable expressing emotions in the way that he is, it's been challenging to kind of tap into that and to be vulnerable and present in the game. But I'd say the most rewarding thing has just been kind of the reaction from people who like what we do and are vocal about it. You know, I mean, I never thought I'd have fan art of one of my stupid little monster children, but I do, and we all do, and it's strange and weird, and I enjoy it though. You know, who doesn't like validation? But yeah, those would be the two.
All right. So one other thing we've seen, you know, with the characters and, you know, that vulnerability you mentioned, Jack, you know, we've seen a few blossoming romances. We've seen, you know, Earthendir and Amity's relationship, Kiva's interest in Irina, Metreon's pursuit of Ismark, and, you know, of course, Kiva and Metreon, and really the world's attraction to Esmeralda. So how did you, out of character and I guess in character, make the decision for who they would be romantically interested in or pursue, you know? How do you think that romance or interest in romance has affected your character?
I'm going to start this question the way I start every question about romance, which is that, believe it or not, again, I was not intending for Kiva to feel the way that she did about Irina, which I will say is a testament to Dragna's beautiful characterization of Irina, even given the little bit that we are given raw. I think for those of us women love women's out there, the relationships and the feelings tend to come on fast and strong, and it's usually based off of one sense, at least in my experience of all the people that I've ever you know, been interested in. It's you get a sense really early on that this is someone that you could have a connection with, and Kiva got that sense from Irina. Obviously, they are now, you know, they have now had a couple of conversations about it and have reached the understanding that, you know, Kiva is going to have these feelings, because obviously once those feelings start, it's kind of hard to make them go away, but that it's not ever going to, you know, she's not ever going to put pressure on Irina, and that love can manifest in different ways. And sometimes the most powerful love can be a platonic love between friends. And they have found a friendship that I think, you know, transcends just a trauma bond in Barovia. And I think Kiva has never had that. I know Kiva has never had that. She had a friend outside of Barovia who she had met through the Thieves Guild and had sort of helped her through some of the stuff that happened with Garrick and Ava. But, obviously she has no way of contacting that person. And even that friendship was not something that she was ever particularly open with. So Irina has coaxed out a vulnerability and a trust that I think she was not expecting to feel. But there is also, there is also pain and sadness that she is not good enough in her mind or the right person, because she spent so long feeling like she doesn't belong in a place. She didn't belong in the Feywild. She didn't belong in Neverwinter. She couldn't find place in a domestic partnership. And so she's trying to navigate who she is and how she relates to a romantic relationship. I think Esmeralda for her, and this is something I was talking about with Jack, actually, she's never going to make the first move. If Esmeralda is interested, it's going to have to be the ball is in her court firmly, because, after opening up to Irina and, being rejected in so many words, even though they are still friends, that sort of puts you on the back burner of seeking that sort of relationship out. But I also know she watched what happened with Strahd and Amity and Erthrindir. And I think it would take a lot of convincing from someone who was explicitly interested in her to make her take that risk, because she already has weaknesses that Strahd can exploit, and that he has exploited. And I think she doesn't want to give him more ammunition. And so after watching what he forced, Amity and Erthrindir to go through and forcing them to make that choice, she's definitely put off from it a little bit. So she's open, but I think she is now that's now even more of a backseat than it was when she got here.
Yeah, for Metron at least. So it's a little bit more and even more and less complicated for him. With Ismark, he's an attractive man, but more importantly, when he found out that he was Burgomaster's son, he was an attractive man, possibly with money. So the initial attraction was, the ability to, or the possibility of finding a handsome man to fleece. Obviously, that wasn't the case. And I think as the game has progressed, his relationship with Ismark is kind of not necessarily dulled, but he sees him more as a person rather, as opposed to just a Mark or a John. Esmeralda is a bit different, though. And believe it or not, Metron doesn't really think about the things that he does. Shocking, I know. But I don't think he quite understands what he's feeling towards Esmeralda. He just knows that she's very pretty and very strong, and it's things that he responds to, and he feels safe around her in a way that I don't think he's felt safe around necessarily anybody else. And that's, nothing against any of the other characters, but it's just something that everyone else has been on his level of struggling to figure their way out in this world. She has been one of the few people who's kind of stepped up and had the strength to stand against things like Strahd and his armies of the undead and whatnot. Who else has blown a lightning bolt into a bunch of ghouls? It's her. And so yeah, he's exploring that unconsciously right now. I don't think it's consciously something that he's aware of, but I think over time we'll see where it goes.
Oh boy, yeah. So lots happened since last time on my front, but as far as romance for Erthrindir, I think the first time he legitimately considered Amity as a romantic prospect was probably on the balcony in Death House. There was that little 10-minute moment there where they were talking and kind of had found themselves in a position where the rest of the party were, at least they assumed them to be compromised in some way, and it was the only them they could trust. And like there was this, I guess, this just kind of instant chemistry, which just made a lot of sense, and I think which made Earthrendir sit up and take notice. Because, like, to spoil a later question, he thinks everyone in the party's incredibly attractive. My boy is bisexual as hell. But, like, there was that sense where he kind of sat up and was like, oh, this person might be more than that. But I think when he actually, like, started thinking about it was after Amity gave him the little cinnamon heart-shaped bun after the Wizard of Wines, because Earthrendir is very much the dad friend, and I say that jokingly, but in the sense of he is very used to being the person who needs to be the one giving support and affection. Like, it's where he feels comfortable. It's what he feels like his role is. And, you know, kind of as a consequence of that, he either has closed himself off from or just isn't really used to receiving, I guess, kind of the thoughtfulness that Amity's consistently shown him, like the consistent interest in him and what he likes, and also just genuine, like, unobligated kindness. So I think that probably helped. But from there, I think he started taking notice of her. And I think what makes them click, at least to me, is that I'd say they're the two characters in the party who have their hearts on their sleeves. Not explicitly, and it's not like they share, I'm not talking backstory, but Earthrendir's very, I mean, you know, we've seen this over and over. He's very emotionally, he puts himself out there, and he wants you to put yourself right back. Like, he is, if he likes you, he's going to give you all that he's got. And so meeting someone who has the same kind of, I guess, kind of zest and passion, both for life and kind of willingness to not try and keep their cards close to their chest emotionally, has really kind of turned his little crush from something into oh shit, this is someone I would say I love you to in the heat of the moment, which he's going to be trying to address that at some point. That's a conversation that needs to happen. But yeah, no, I think that summarizes things.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, from Amity's side here, I definitely wasn't planning anything. And I still don't know exactly how Amity and Earthrendir will end up. If we even stay together, who knows? It's just that I was especially inside Amity's head enough to realize, sort of from her perspective, how great Earthrendir was as, like, first of all, smart and funny. Second of all, people were calling him Elf Dad, but it's really Elf, openly sensitive, like, I'll make sure we all get out of here alive leader. As Twy brings up, the balcony scene was a big part, and if Discord logs aren't lying to me, I think the moment I really realized Amity would fall in love with Earthrendir and sort of messaged Twy to make sure that this was an okay thing was the second half of episode 9, when we were first staying in the Blue Water Inn. So probably it was all the, like, sort of fun chats we were doing with each other then. Feel free to sort of source dive that episode and see if you can figure out the moment.
I remember.
The real After Dark.
Ooh.
It's in the latter half, during the drunkenness.
Right, the drunkenness.
Yes.
Classic beer goggles, you know.
So it's funny because way before we actually started streaming, when we were still doing setup for this, there was, a period of time when all of us were talking about our plans for our characters and things like that. And I had made the decision then that Lillison was asexual and aromantic. And I have tried very hard to stick to that since then. I think it's going to become, like, more obvious, especially next episode, following up on all of the discussion from the most recent episode. And, she, not only doesn't really know what appeals to people about relationships, but she doesn't even really know like why people think that she should feel like, you know, she's missing out on something. And that is like very like that's a bit of a role-playing stretch for me, because I tend to play a lot of characters who are you know, in need of something, you know, emotional in their lives and latch on to other characters pretty quickly. And learning how to not do that and to have a character's sort of weaknesses be centered entirely about something else has been really refreshing and fun for me. So.
All right, cool. And here's a question we got from Tender Chef, somewhat relatedly. If anyone wants to take this one, you know, obviously romances are kind of, you know, very complex things that have to be handled very carefully. So how does one, either as a DM or a player, handle this kind of thing tastefully, both in and out of game?
Well, oh boy, can it go so horribly wrong. And I don't want to speak for every woman or woman identifying person who's ever played D&D, but I think every single one of us has a horror story. I'd be willing to bet money on that. The thing that I can say, and it's what I say with also setting up horror games, communication is the most important thing. So when it was coming to, you know, Kiva, before they left to go to the winery, gave that letter to Irina, and like I messaged Dragna about that to make sure that it was okay first. You know, Jack and I today had a conversation about, you know, Kiva and Metrion's crush on Esmeralda. The only way that romance, either in between players or between players and NPCs, can happen is with clear communication. Obviously, you know, you want the like sparks and the improv moments, but you know, you can do that in the framework of, okay, I would like to enter into this part of a dynamic with you, and the safest way to do that is to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So you have to know what you want. Like, you know, you have to be like, okay, I think my character and you would be a good match. I think, you know, they have a dynamic already, but you also have to be willing to be like, you know, to take like a no, and to take a I don't really feel that way, because, you know, it takes two people to tango, and it takes two people to work a relationship in D&D, and you know, you have to do it carefully and with grace. Obviously, you don't want to make other people at the table uncomfortable. You know, you also work that out with the DM in the first place too, I think, because, you know, some tables are less comfortable with sexual content than others. Some tables are less, you know, even uncomfortable with the idea of romance in, you know, romance in general. It's also hard in a Curse of Strahd campaign, I think, and specifically horror campaigns, because the bonds that characters make with other characters are mostly through traumatic incidents. And so you just want to make sure that you as a player are protecting yourself as well, because I think it can get very dicey very easily. And the best way to avoid that confusion is very, very clear upfront communication.
Yeah, and not only you know, making sure that nobody at the table is uncomfortable, but there's also a pretty common issue, actually from the LARPing world, where you know, you're in character embodying a character, and you know, if your characters enter into a romance, this sometimes also happens in tabletop RPGs. You know, sometimes it goes too well, and that character bleed spills over into real life. And that is an entire other can of worms. You know, it really just comes down to being somebody who is thoughtful and considerate of other people, because it can be, you know, very like compelling to keep exploring the feelings that, you know, your character has, and, you know, enjoying that vicariously. But it's something that needs to be handled with great care when things are going well in addition to when things, maybe are not making other people comfortable.
All right, so now to take things from this bright place to a much darker one. So, you guys have now had 4 encounters with Strahd von Zarevich himself. We've had the Black Carriage, we've had the Blue Water Inn, St. Andrew's Feast, and now we've had Kresk. So, how do you feel about how Strahd's relationship with the characters has evolved, and where do you think it might go next?
Well, for Metreon, I think it feels much more personal, especially after the Church of St. Andrew incident. And that sort of so in his whole reveal, he backstory reveal, he had kind of talked about his history with being manipulated and being used as entertainment, and his he sees that a lot of that dynamic in Strahd, and so for that, it's very it's very triggering, but also it's it's a determination to survive against that. Whereas before he was sort of just drifting along and trying to get out. I think that he realizes that the only way out is through, and having killed someone who he was, even in the brief amount of time that he knew him, close with, and seeing that he killed basically what was a source of light in this very dark place, he is now determined to not be abused in that same way.
Boy, it's like you read my mind. Yeah, Strahd has a knack for making it very personal. And obviously there are a lot of parallels between people that Kiva shared portions of her life with, and Strahd. And I think at the end of the day, it's a very selfish drive. She wants to be the one to if not do it herself, but she wants to make sure that she's there when he's taken down, which is why now and pretty much every fight that they've had since the Black Carriage, she is right up in his fucking face, and and will stay there. It comes from a partially growing heroic drive to make sure that, okay, well, if at least he's focused on me, that gives everyone else a chance to, work with a potential distraction or to, take the heat off of them. But it also comes from a very selfish drive that, like, I need to see you bleed, and I need to see you feel the pain that you've made me feel. And also sort of use him as an avatar for past pain. That this is, very much a kill your darlings in every sense of the word. This is, about making sure that a part of her life that was very painful ends with him, so that she can have some peace.
I honestly think that that's kind of one of the things that makes, approaching Curse of Strahd kind of, interesting to me in that way. Not that I think, running Abuse Simulator 2021 is necessarily something that anyone should enjoy participating in. But, insofar as, Barovia is a place where characters can face their demons and, overcome them.
Yeah, it's been really, really lovely so far, to work that relationship for sure.
So it's tough because, I think for Erthrindir, Strahd, what he's said to him hasn't been as intensely personal as it has been for the rest of the party. But I think what's stuck with him about the relationship are 2 things. One is just the immediate violence. I'd say the defining event so far before Amity's thing, before Pym threatening Amity came along, was Strahd turning down letting Erthrindir letting him bite him and just saying, no, your propensity to try and help people and use your body, whether that be, physically or emotionally, as a shield, is not a strength. It is a weakness, and it is one I'm going to exploit when I try and rip your heart out of your chest. So, I think that's honestly what stuck with him. That idea that this thing that, I think he's always been, if not proud of, then always thought is just the right thing, the thing he needs to be. This kind of, ingrained protectiveness, Strahd twists it and turns it into a weapon, into something to make him hurt and to hurt other people. And that's why I think, like, him eventually snapping and saying, no, I'm not making your choices anymore was important for him. It's because, like, for Earthendir, a lot of his issues, I guess, is that his problems are a lot of them feel external in a way that he doesn't think he can control. And so he had gotten so resigned, okay, so bad things are going to keep happening to me over and over and over. And then what kind of like the switch that finally flipped was, not if I stop them. I might not have been able to stop what happened to my people. I might not have been able to stop what happened to my friends. But I can stop one man. I can stop one vampire. And I'm going to try and stab him in the throat. And so I think that's where he's going. He's realized he has control over one thing, and he's going to try and use it.
All right, so very cool, guys. I know that I'll certainly keep a mental note of that for future encounters. Speaking of which, we got a question from the Diamond Paragon that I'll answer real quick. Question is, what would be the best time for a Strahd encounter? Specifically, the frequency. How do I make sure he doesn't get tedious or expected? So, and you guys can feel free to pitch in as well if you have any thoughts. But I guess my approach in general, both Twice Bitten and otherwise, is I kind of work off of an algorithm for Strahd. And I guess this is kind of publicizing private information. But basically what I'm thinking about Strahd is, he's this very proactive chess piece. He can go wherever he wants and whenever he's needed. So for me, I think, does Strahd need to be here right now? And, just from a frequency basis, as time passes and the number of days since the last encounter increases, the probability that Strahd is going to show up approaches 1. So, a single day, probably not. 2 days, maybe. 3 days, probably. 4 days, almost certainly. And, by the fifth day, if he's not there, he's definitely going to be there by that point. And, in addition, there's the complication of, pacing. Like, is the party, going on the right track? Are they getting lost? Are they meandering? Are they going too slow? Do they lack urgency? Strahd can push them into gear or switch them into a different gear. And then the final consideration is, just narrative and emotional tension. Like, is there a narrative or dramatic beat that a Strahd encounter can fulfill right now? For example, Esmeralda being introduced. Strahd is a way to crystallize that relationship as she shows up and tracks him down there. Especially, a Strahd encounter with Earthendir and Amity's relationship. A Strahd encounter is a perfect way to twist that. Or same with Kiva's, revelations about Irina and, their relationship or not. That's something that arrives at a perfect juncture that's really ripe for Strahd to really, dig into in a way that, makes for a lot of very interesting conflict. So, that's kind of how I look at it, which is, has it been a long time? Can he help redirect or speed the party? And are there any narrative beats that he can take advantage of or drive forward? So those are my general considerations. Okay, so we next have a question from Mindless Idiots. Hopefully they don't seem to be neither of those things because they have a fun question. Due to the short travel distances and milestone leveling, you can go from level 1 to 10 in a couple of weeks. How do you roleplay going from someone who's emotionally and physically fragile to someone who may still be emotionally fragile but is still a one-person army, basically?
This question makes a lot of assumptions because you can get to level 10 and still be very physically fragile. That is absolutely how I envision Lillison is going to go.
Negative HP.
But yes, I feel like at this, for this particular party, we're not optimizing our characters. We're going with things that are flavorful for role playing rather than getting to level 10 and being this juggernaut. And I think all of us started out with very different ratios of emotional fragility versus physical sturdiness. So I think that over the course of the campaign, we're going to get stronger, but we're also going to have a lot of that emotional growth. And I think an awful lot about emotional growth. I have done 2 fireside chats about how to plan out your character's emotional growth. And I think the best way to just approach this is to link those 2 things. As our characters get more comfortable with who they are, they, do some of that because of getting comfortable with their abilities. I think that even though all of us aren't really defining our characters' personalities by their class, there's still an awful lot of, hey, this thing is happening to me. Am I going to contextualize this new magic or whatever as a tool or as a burden, as something that Barovia is doing to me, as something that I can use to fight back against Barovia? And I think all of our characters are going to get to a point eventually where they're a lot more comfortable with themselves as people as well as with their abilities.
Yeah, that's such a delicious way of looking at it, because and it's sort of, this game has sort of shot me in the foot in some ways, because I've always been very interested in backstories and role-playing complex stories and stuff like that, and telling a narrative, as opposed to just doing it to be a sort of murder hobo. But in another campaign that I play, and my character is very much like, the cool stuff that you get with a level up, and the fun stuff, and there's no really narrative reason for it. It's just because I want it. And it's just so boring to me compared to what I've been doing with Kiva. And it was very easy for me to make her, at level 7, just a fucking powerhouse. But even if she's physically stronger, it doesn't really feel like it. She can do new things, but she doesn't understand them and doesn't know how to apply them with the way that she's always lived her life, which is to fight or flee. And it's been very challenging, because when I'm building my character, I know what the best thing for do. If her goal is to kill Strahd, I know exactly what to pick for her to be able to do that quickly as she continues to level up. But I'm not doing that, and it's part of it is because of the rules, and part of it is because I am so interested in taking her the way that she is feeling. Each level is I look back at, like, what happened before this to help me take that next level. So she was barbarian for a while until she met Irina, and then that paladin started. Depending on what happened with Irina at the pool, she might not have taken that next level in paladin had Irina not been there. So I think it's so fun to be able to just say, I have no ideas about what this character will be at the end. Every experience is going to color their level up. So depending on what happens after this reading, I mean, fuck it, like the big brain energy from Madame Ava, she'll go to school to be a wizard. So who knows, right?
Who knows indeed. All right, here's the next question. This one is more DM stuff in general, because, obviously, everyone here has run Curse of Strahd a little bit at least. So, in general, characters exist, and sometimes frequently, characters die or leave the party or otherwise become unavailable. So Barovia in particular is kind of a weird place because it's, in the middle of the mists. It's, out in the middle of nowhere, and it can be kind of jarring to introduce someone at, later levels especially. So this question comes from Reddit user Victor Van Vroom. So when you're DMing Curse of Strahd, how do you handle backup characters, replacement characters, that sort of thing?
So, got a 2-part answer for this one of which is not particularly helpful, which is to say, don't. I think Curse of Strahd offers a lot of ways to bring back dead characters, even rules as written, and taking a little bit of inspiration, adding in a community supplement like Ginny Greenteeth or Revenant rules. I think the story, I'm normally all for, like, yeah, no, I like characters dying, but I think the particular nature of Curse of Strahd works best with a concurrent party. But if you could, often literally the best thing is to have them wander in from the mists. I think it's almost always best to have them not have a history in Barovia. I think the mists offer a really tight way to integrate someone into the party, and a really easy way to mix them in with the story. You don't have to figure out why this one Barovian commoner suddenly has class levels and wants to come with you. You don't have to stat out an NPC. It's just one more person who was in the situation that, you know, your party was in 2 or 3 levels ago, who needs help. That is as good a way to breed familiarity and trust as any.
So one option, going on what Twi is saying, that, you know, you might not need backup characters. I'm stealing this one from Dragna, who used it in the first campaign I played with him, which is to let a PC seeking resurrection play a ghost for a short time period, like literally the ghost stat block from the monster manual, until they either find resurrection or, I guess, fail to do so. That having been said, it did work out really well. Also, ghosts can like go through walls, so your players might do some pretty wacky things with it. That having been said, in my campaign, there have been 3 replacement characters.
Oh god, right? Didn't it, like, someone became a werewolf and like you've had a time,
right? But to be fair, I gave the player the option to do the ghost thing, and they were like, actually, I'm more interested in doing this instead. It's more narratively satisfying for me if my character's story just ends right here. So, I mean, I guess your players can just choose whatever. One of them wandered in through the mists. One of them had been sort of hanging out with the Vistani for a while at the Serpool encampment. And one of them was the sort of canonical brother of one of the existing player characters from that player character's backstory. I don't know, just let your players choose whatever. It's cool.
So, yeah, I ran my game, and my players were, you know, as terrified as players usually are of their characters dying. What they didn't know was that I had followed Mandy Mod's advice to draft up level 19 versions of each of their characters. I ended up actually doing 2 versions of each character. And when one of their characters died, I would have a little dialogue with, you know, some of the dark powers, and then let them play that super just souped up character for the rest of that particular encounter. And after that, they would have like a lingering boon for a month or so. None of the standard Adventures League boons, like these were actually like really good things. And unfortunately, I was unable to kill any of my PCs until the final Strahd battle, in which case Captain Char, who is around in the Twice Bitten chat a lot of the time and in the Curse of Strahd server, had their character die and then rediscover his powers as the Elven God of Death, which worked out perfectly fine. But if your players are not actively agitating to switch to a new character, let them keep the old one. It's, you know, there's so many ways, rules as written or not, to allow them to keep on going with their old character, and it fits in so well thematically with what Barovia is and the whole "you really can't escape this place" thing.
Okay, cool. So we got one more question on the backup characters thing. It's not quite backup, but I know that at least one of our players, Jack, you had a number of character concepts, right? What were some of those?
I did. Yeah. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I was the last person to have their character approved. And I'd gone through a lot of different ideas with Dragna. And having played the game, I now understand why they were turned down, and that's because a lot of them emulated or had very similar stories and things going on to the other characters. Let's see, I had a draconic sorcerer who was a noble-born and wanted to hide that they were draconic.
I'm
I had
sorry.
I had a woman who was in an abusive relationship, and she had fled and got caught in the mists. I had I had an academic, not a.
This is so funny that Jack just built our party on his own.
What's happening now?
I had an academic who had escaped a kind of a tumultuous home life, and had encountered some weird controversy within their university. The only person I didn't have like an analog for was Amity, because I was already in another game playing a really kind of happy-go-lucky character, and I didn't want to bring that to this game. But so so I now know why those other characters were rejected. And
Jack trying to solo run this campaign.
Right, I could do it.
Seriously, I did not know any of this. I can't even describe how happy I am right now.
We just have a one shot where we play Jack's characters.
Yeah, let's do that.
If I ever have to make a backup character, can Jack just like send me his 7th idea?
Yeah, I'll just. I think it was like at least 10 that I sent Dragna, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a number. I enjoyed looking through them.
Yeah.
Wasn't there one of them who was like a monster exterminator or something?
Yes.
Esmeralda. There we go. That's
exactly. Yeah.
All right. It's been a fun round. I think we've gone through a lot of fun stuff tonight, so I'm gonna finish it off with a lightning round. Feel free to respond or not as you will. But we've gotten some buzz about this ever since the in-depth conversations with diagrams and equations from the last session. So, either as yourself or as your character, or both or neither, where would you or your character put the other characters on the 10 out of 10 scale?
All right. I will not say specific numbers so that people don't get insulted, but I will rank them so that they are a little bit insulted. So Amity would rank the characters, obviously Airthrindir first, followed by Metreon, Kiva, and then Lillison. Me personally, I would rank the characters on my 1 to 10 scale. First Amity, then Metreon, then Airthrindir, then Kiva, then Lillison. Lillison, I'm sorry you're the last in both lists. I really appreciate having you around when I'm almost dying and need to survive. I just think you'd be worse when I'm like, want to play Smash Brothers with someone on Friday.
Lillison totally wants to play Smash Brothers with somebody, especially if she can sit like 10 feet apart from them.
As you do when you play Smash Brothers. That's normal.
Yeah, because, otherwise you might like accidentally punch somebody.
I think Metron already gave everybody's scale, so I think I'm
He
good.
never did Airthrindir.
Oh, that's interesting. I think given his own personal history, it would be hard for him to quantify fairly. So I would say he would pass on that.
Gotcha.
So going first as Kiva, she rates the party, and again, I'm not going to do numbers because I feel like that's mean, but she would rate Metreon first, Lillison second, Airthrindir third, and Amity fourth, and put herself last. Me as Serena, I'm gonna go Lillison, Metreon, Amity, Airthrindir, and Kiva's first in my heart always, but I feel like I don't need to put her on my own rating scale. I obviously think she's the most attractive person in the party.
Right, yeah, me. So I wrote down my numbers. You're making me sad, but I will be nice. So yeah, from Airthrindir's perspective, he thinks Amity's number one, of course, and from there it goes Lillison, Metreon, Kiva, himself. And from a me perspective, it goes Kiva, Amity, Metreon, Lillison, Airthrindir. Like, and that's not an insult. Like, I made Airthrindir to be cute. Y'all just made fucking absurd PCs. What the fuck?
You all have such deprecating opinions of your own PCs. I mean,
Oh no, I don't think he's bad. I just think y'all are better. Although
When-
your in character also is nursing some not great self-image.
well, I meant in character. I mean, Metreon obviously thinks he's a 10, so he doesn't understand why everybody else doesn't think they're 10s. But
That is fair.
Kiva's like, I prefer if no one perceives me on a scale of any number.
That makes
she
sense,
Just,
yeah.
just does not want people
don't
to
rate me,
notice it.
please. Don't look at
Please
me.
Don't look at me.
Fun. All right.
Jack.
Cool.
Dragna, what is your rating for our PCs?
Oh
geez.
yeah.
Huh. I have to think about that. I guess like going down like I don't know. Do you mix like personality with like aesthetic or?
I mean, if
feel
you
like-
want,
Yeah, but I feel like it's mostly just a visual aesthetic, right?
yeah,
That's
just
fair.
like
I guess I would probably do Erthrindir, Amity, Lillison, Metreon, Kiva.
interesting.
Yeah, that is very
Interesting.
interesting.
I see the thinking behind that though. I feel like I get it.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah, knowing you, I feel like that makes full sense.
Oh well, thank you.
So, as I said before, like Lillison has no concept of any of this scale, and so I feel like that's completely moot. On my part, I said from the first moment that I saw the original character art that Erthrindir looked like somebody that I would instantly develop an ill-advised crush on and never say anything about. So that's my top.
Bless.
All right. Anyone else? Or just Erthrindir?
I feel like Jack has to go, right?
Oh, I mean, I would. So yeah, I would go Metreon, Lillison, Kiva, probably Amity, and then Erthrindir. And it's nothing against Erthrindir. I just the long hair. It gets in your mouth. It's a whole thing.
Was that you or Metreon?
Oh, that's me. Metreon. Well, so Metreon it would be himself. Lillison, Kiva. It would be probably Randy before Amity because he thinks of Amity as more of like a sibling as opposed to like a object to be desired.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, so ends the ranking lightning round as we knew. A party of 10s.
Full party of
so-
10s.
Exactly.
Ends across the
Wait,
board.
you didn't do it as Strahd.
I don't want to know what Strahd thinks.
I want to know what Strahd thinks.
Obsessively want to know what Strahd thinks.
I mean, like the thing about like Rules of Strahd is he's functionally asexual. Like he just like likes pretty and interesting things.
all right. So the eye Strahd.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
What do you think?
Okay. Okay.
yeah, the,
no, he does care for aesthetics. He does care for
the
aesthetics.
consort ranking. What's our
Yeah,
current
fair.
consort ranking?
Okay. Current consort rating. I mean, consort and successor are two different things. Consort rating: Kiva's number 1, Metreon's number 2, Erthrindir's number 3, Amity number 4. Lillison is number 1 for successor, though.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
Kiva's finally number 1 at something, y'all. We did it.
Kiva's number 1 at everything in my heart.
Oh.
Yep.
Aww. Yeah. So there's the new VSTF.
There we go.
There you have it. All right, cool. Well, this has been a fun time, y'all. So thank you for sticking around for another After Dark. Hopefully we don't take 10 episodes before getting to the next one. Otherwise,
Well, hopefully we do. I mean, let's draw
Yeah,
this
well,
out.
Very fair.
I
Very
didn't beat
fair.
Strahd by 10 episodes. I'm not even gonna need
100%.
episodes.
Just march up to the castle next episode.
Wait, I have an announcement.
An
Mm.
announcement.
I think I have an announcement. Hold on, let me just double
Go
check
for it.
something real quick.
Drum roll.
So I believe Yes. So, yeah, it looks like Metreon has outlived Mollywalk.
Oh my god.
Congratulations!
Oh my god. Please, okay, Talus and Jaffe, if you're listening, I know you're listening. You're always listening. We did it. We did it.
Sorry.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you all for sticking around. We will see you on Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Now, actually Eastern, not daylight, EDT. God, daylight savings time can go to hell and back.
Damn you, Ben Franklin.
1:30 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. No, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. I can do time numbers, I promise. On Saturday for Twice Bitten. Otherwise, thank you all for hanging out, and we shall see you around on the medias of socialization. Otherwise, be safe, y'all. Take care, and have a good night.
You're all tens.
Can we make our group motto, it's daylight savings time?
I